We've entered our third book, Leviticus, or Vayikra in Hebrew, and it begins rather prosaically with God called to Moses and spoke to him. But these simple words at the start of this book inspired 15 very long paragraphs of sermonizing in a 5th century Midrash called Vayikra Rabbah. Midrash is the way that rabbis, of course, add color or fill in gaps or explain inconsistencies in a text. Sometimes a midrash can completely reverse the literal meaning of a passage through creative interpretation. With Vayikra Rabbah, the rabbis continue the process of revelation. They make the fixed text of Leviticus into a living text. Rabbi Michael Marmer recently shared this particular piece of Midrash with me where I sat, which the rabbis used to illustrate. They wanted to understand, why did God call Moses? Chapter 1:15 of Vayikra Rabbah explains, what is the difference between Moses and all the other prophets? Rabbi Yehuda says, the prophets would see through 9 aspaklaria, or looking glasses. Moses, however, saw through only 1 aspaklaria. As it is stated in Numbers, and I spoke to him mouth to mouth in a vision, not in riddles. In other words, why Moses? Because of the way that he could perceive things. All the other prophets could only understand God's truth through 9 aspaklaria, 9 prisms or multifocals or filters, whereas Moses only needed 1. He had clarity of vision. But I think there's another way of understanding this midrash which flips the rabbi's intention on its head, and I base it on that Hebrew/Aramaic word aspaklaria, which is a loan word from the Greek speklon, meaning glass or mirror, related to the root of spectacles as well. Now, as a spectacles wearer, I can appreciate what it means to need aspaklaria in order to have vision. For the first 10 years of my life, I didn't even know that other people could see leaves on a tree, individual leaves, and I didn't know that you didn't have to squint to read a blackboard. When I was finally taken to an optometrist, he put my face behind a big machine called a phoropter with all these gears and hundreds of lenses. I hit the aspaklaria jackpot. And then the optometrist used a method called subjective refraction, where I sat with my face pressed against this machine, looking at a distant reader board, while he alternated between a series of lenses asking, which is better, 1 or 2? 1 or 2? Now, in the beginning of this process, it was really obvious which lenses gave me better vision. But as we got closer and closer to my true vision, it became clear why this process was called subjective refraction, because it became very hard, maybe impossible, to decide which lens was better. They were different. One made the letters maybe cleaner, but then they looked farther away. Or one of them made the letters a little sharper, but it made my head hurt. Was there really only one lens that could capture the way I was supposed to see the world? Now, while the prophets of the Midrash suggested that Moses was superior to all the other prophets because he only needed 1 aspaklaria to understand God's truth, perhaps we should all just hope to be a little bit more like the rest of the prophets, who must look through a number of prisms in order to gain true understanding. Like, for example, our tradition's most famous apostate, Baruch Spinoza. He saw through the world through so many different lenses, he was excommunicated from the Jewish community in 1656 at the age of only 23 years old. Now, what were these heretical views that he had? He believed that God wasn't just up there, transcendent, but immanent and in the natural world. He believed that God was not at all like a human being who speaks like people do, which meant that revelation had to be understood metaphorically, not just literally. He felt the best way to know God was through the human capacity to reason and observe the natural world itself. I don't know about you, but that sounds like the God I believe in. And today, we might view Spinoza as way ahead of his time, a prophet. Spinoza, once he was forced out of the Jewish community, supported himself by, you're not going to believe this, he was a lens grinder. He made aspaklaria. He became quite obsessed also with microscopes and telescopes as well, opening up the world of the smallest speck to the furthermost star. How fitting that this heretic, the lens grinder, enabled so many of us to understand God through different prisms. I think of one of the issues of our day, how we really all want to have a really simple truth. We want to look through one lens and understand the most complicated matters of our time. But really only Moses can do that. For the rest of us, we must constantly correct one corruption of our optics and our vision with other aspaklaria. This is the beauty of the process of discerning truth. I know it's hard to be challenged to see through another lens, to be asked, which is better, one or two? Because the closer we get, the harder it is to decide. You might even have to settle for the realization that sometimes there isn't a better. That different aspaklaria might even provide you with a conflicting perspective on the same site. This can unsettle us, flip our understanding of things. But maybe that is exactly the point. We are in the season of Purim. It begins on Saturday night. And a theme of the holiday of subversion and reversion is the call to turn everything upside down. V'nafochu. We can flip everything on its head, or we could look at it through another prism. The whole point is that we should see it anew. So just as we reverse our destiny on Purim and win the lottery, today we view Spinoza, our tradition's heretic, as a kind of prophet, and we upend the Vayikra Rabbah Midrash, which was there to prove that Moses was better than all the rest and suggest that maybe we should be more like the other prophets. Hanafochu. Let's turn all of this on its head. And while we're at it, in these dark, polarizing times filled with so much hate, let's instead fill this season with love and wisdom, discernment, and happiness. After all, it is Adar.